I wanted to talk about the old days. Ed and I, this is something that not everybody knows. Most people don't know. Ed and I knew each other before there was YouTube, before there was VinWiki or Cars and Bids or Quirks and Features. Ed and I were friends back in the day in Atlanta.
That's right.
So I don't know exactly when we met.
So I graduated from Tech in 08.
Oh,
You graduated from Emory
in 10. And Ed was, I'm going to toot Ed's horn a little. Ed went to work for the Lamborghini dealership here in Atlanta. And he was like the superstar Lambo guy at the Lamborghini dealership. I was like a kid who like had trashy cars. And Ed was like so nice for some reason to me and like was always warm and welcoming and invited me on mountain runs even when I had cars that did not belong on mountain runs to like the North Georgia mountains. And Ed was just always like the greatest guy when I was like right out of college looking for like a car community. There was Ed. Okay, so here's a few things that I remember.
Okay.
The stolen 612.
Yes. Yeah. During the rental car days, the week of my wedding.
The week of your wedding.
That was a real thing. Yeah. And we were trying to use Chasing Exotics to find the cars.
Right.
And it would pop up at Lenox Valet, but because it was across different counties and jurisdictions, it was very, very challenging to try to get anybody to take it because it's theft by conversion and things we've talked about a lot.
Right.
But yeah, that definitely happened.
The mountain drives were all really special. I remember that was like the first time I ever like gone on a drive with a group, and that was cool. But you were like, Ed was like the Lambo guy. Everybody knew Ed Bolian. I'm serious, like the Lambo guy. Everyone knew. In Atlanta, if you were in the exotic car scene, you knew Ed long before there was ever like a VinWiki or anything like that.
How about that? I mean, and honestly, when I was thinking about kind of the next chapter after shutting down the rental car company and selling off the customer base and everything, I was not sure if I wanted to go work at Ferrari of Atlanta or Lamborghini Atlanta. You know, this was 2009, so the depths of
things
the recession.
were tough.
And so I knew it was going to be harder to sell Lamborghinis because even then you still had to order. You couldn't just go get a Scud or a 16M. And so I was like, it's going to be harder to sell them. I can be recognized more for being good at selling Lamborghinis than I could at selling Ferraris. And so yeah, it was a really good fit and a pretty amazing time. And yeah, I remember those mountain drives. I remember the one with the E63. There was a red Carrera GT that I
have
sold
a
couple
picture
of times.
of the E63 wagon next to the red Carrera. I thought that would be the closest I would ever get to a Carrera GT. As I recall, when you graduated from Tech, you went and lived in like the rental car warehouse, didn't you?
I did for quite some time.
It was
really,
like a bathroom, and it was like every car.
It wasn't really even a bathroom. There was a utility sink that I had taken out, and I built a platform to get over the drain pipe, and then relocated the spout
for a shower.
Yeah, and I didn't realize when I built it, which is not even built, that it had only a hand washing hot water heater. So it had about 48 seconds of hot water in this warehouse where I lived.
How long did you live there?
Well, so I graduated until I got married. So I graduated in spring of 08 and got married in summer of 09. So a little over a year. And it was amazing. I would do it right now. Like it is.
You basically do.
That's right. I have the
slightly
modern
nicer
version.
version of that.
That's right. Now we have carpet.
We have carpet.
Oh man,
carpet in a toilet, in a real bathroom.
Yeah, a real shower. Yeah, that was a thing.
Those were the days. We must have learned about each other because I was doing the car spot. I used to car spot around Atlanta and post. Remember on Ferrari Chat in the Atlanta Spotters thread?
Absolutely. Oh, the Atlanta Spotters thread was so good.
The Atlanta Spotters thread was where we would all go to post like what cars we had seen, and it was the Ferrari Chat was like a bunch of older guys, and so they would be like, saw 308 today on Peachtree Parkway. And it's like, okay.
Well, I was looking at it to see where the rental cars were being used.
Right.
Because it was like, I had the trackers and everything, but it was like, I want to see where they're parking as long as they're safe and stuff like that. Man, what a thing.
And I started posting like photographs. And then I started going to all the events, and you were at the events, and it was like, hey, come on by the Lamborghini dealership.
Man, I had a deal get blown up on a 997.2 GT3 RS because somebody on that thread had taken pictures of another guy doing donuts in a test drive. And he had just gone to this cul-de-sac, and they're on Sport Cup 2s. And
that's in the same car.
Yeah.
You're kidding.
And the other guy that I already had planning to buy it saw that and was like, oh, I'm not going to touch it. Like, we'll get you tires. No, I want another one. That would have been like 2012.
Wow. So that was like 2012. That was like the heyday of all that. Then like the Cannonball stuff happened and all that. And I remember then you launched VinWiki and became popular on YouTube. And now all of my friends are Ed fans on YouTube. But I remember watching it happen and being like, like I'm sure you probably had a similar thought of like, wow, this idiot that I knew who was like a child is now like becoming a YouTube person.
I don't know how well you'll remember this conversation, but we had it late in 2016. We had launched the VinWiki app, which was designed to really be very much an evolution of car spotting, V-Bulletin site.
Right.
And it was like, this is how collectively we tell the stories of cars.
Right.
And I called you because at the time you were really building up. I thought you already were probably nearing 1 million subscribers in 2016. And, there was really just you and Salamandrin and Vehicle Virgins and these guys that were this like very early adopters, kind of the cohort right after Shmi and Rob Ferretti and TJ Hunt and David Patterson and the guys that are now like 12, 13, 14 years into this. And I was like, Doug, when you do these car reviews, will you just show that you're adding the car you're reviewing to a VinWiki list of cars you've reviewed? And you're like, no, I absolutely will not. I don't want to delegitimize myself to my audience. And I was like, did you hear yourself say that? Because at the time, even though people would call themselves YouTubers, it wasn't remotely common knowledge that you could earn a living making YouTube videos.
I had a lot of problems with, and I still, for years, I had a lot of problems with like automakers not ever wanting to give me cars because they thought YouTube was like a joke.
Yeah.
And so like I always was doing my very best, although I had low production value, I was always doing my very best to like try to, like, this is a real place that your customers are going to get car information, even if you don't think it's legit.
For sure.
And only in the last few years, which is ironic because now, like, I kind of hit my peak and I would have given anything for the kind of access that I have now back then.
Sure.
Like, it would have blown up my channel even more.
When you were still begging for cars to review.
I would go to dealers, like, all the time. It was just a constant thing.
And so I was like, so you don't do any brand deals?
And I never did.
And I was like, do you realize you said that like out of your own mouth? and you told me, you're like, and I don't know if you're, and I might make $10,000 1 month soon on YouTube. And I had a very Wolf of Wall Street moment. I'm like, you show me a pay stub, $10,000, I will quit my job right now. Because I had no interest whatsoever in making car YouTube videos. I'd made a couple of like driving cars around videos at the dealership, but like nothing serious. We were just trying to promote this app. And about 6 or 8 months later, we kind of hit this wall of like everybody needed like to actually make money. Because I didn't make money for almost 2 years to the day when I left the dealership at the end of 2015 until we had started the YouTube channel. I just called a bunch of friends and got a bunch of pizza and beer in the warehouse and said, come tell your best car stories until we actually like made $1. And then I remember the first day I made $100 and I was like, that is a substitute teacher salary. And I made $100 in a day. I have a job again.
It surprises me that you weren't more bullish on it early because you like have the persona and the like. You were doing crazy stuff with cars too when I like we had talked about earlier. We did a story where I was like doing this stuff before there was YouTube just because it was who I was.
Right.
That was true of you also. I mean, you did Cannonball and you had all these crazy cars. You had the rental business just when you were young. Like, it was an interesting story.
Well, the other thing that happened is when I first shot the first batch of 25 VinWiki car stories, I asked you, I asked Freddie, I asked David Patterson, I asked Rob Ferretti, I asked Rob Dom, I asked every YouTuber I know, can I give you VinWiki car stories as another piece of content to release alongside on the days you don't make videos, and you can have extra stuff? I don't want the money. I just want people to know about our app. And everyone said no. People subscribe to YouTube channels because they want to see that person. They don't want to see some random guy show up on YouTube every day telling about a car they didn't ask for. Like, it won't work. So it was never even really a thought that this model of guests telling stories, nobody was doing podcasts back then.
Right.
Like, it was always just a presenter telling them about whatever it was they were here to see. And I remember kind of that frustration, like, nobody's ever going to watch this stuff. And, when you wrote the Cannonball story for Jalopnik, it was like 2,000 or 3,000 great words. Then a few years later, I tried to write the book. And I was like, there's not 200, 300,000 words about this.
I read that book.
So I had to take all of my good car stories from the dealership that could kind of analog to whatever was going on in that moment of the journey to make it not just 3 sweaty dudes not getting in trouble for driving really fast for a long time. And so I had my best stories kind of put together. And so that's why I kind of had them ready to record. And I remember hearing Alex Roy say once, somebody who was on a podcast or whatever, or a radio interview, asked, will you tell us the lot of evidence story? And he's like, well, it takes about 8.5 minutes to tell that story. And I'm like, what idiot knows how long his stories are? And it occurred to me, he's recorded himself telling these stories so he can make them the best they can be.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure every inch of that story is true. I'm now much more sure it's not. But I remember thinking that is an interesting concept to kind of immortalize the stories rather than the current events.
It was a great idea. And one of the reasons it was a great idea, as we talked about, is because it doesn't require you to go and buy cars, which a lot of our colleagues are beholden to.
For sure.
But it was interesting as this kind of took off, and then as my friends were like, there's this VinWiki, this guy, Ed. And I'm like, Ed! I know Ed!
I know him!
I am Ed's. And I always thought that was kind of funny. And we've always kind of kept in touch over the years, but we sort of existed in parallel, doing our own thing. But I still remember all those days back in the OG world where I would drive around trying to spot cars, and you were there, the guy at the Lambo dealer that everybody knew, and you'd come to the Cars and Coffees. And
I remember you telling me, when the CarMax Range Rover really took off, you're like, everybody loves this bumper-to-bumper warranty. And I was like, I was working at the dealership. I said, we have that on everything. And they don't have mileage limitations. And so the Vantage had a warranty because of a phone call.
The concept of making 10 grand in a month, that was like a holy crap kind of thing.
Absolutely.
I don't remember the early days where I first started making money doing it, because I was making actual money doing other stuff. And it would be like $100 here or there. And I always thought that was kind of all it was going to be. Especially because when I started doing it, it never occurred to me that I really would make money. Money on YouTube was for other people.
Right. And it was like Robert Himmler pretending that he was making more than he actually did and stuff which is, hey.
What do other people from back in the Ed days of the Lambo deal, what do they think about this whole situation? You're driving around in a Bugatti, you got 6,000 square feet here, you got this 2 acres, you got pheasants running around. Probably, I don't know.
It's one of those things that fortunately, the circle is still here. So most of the people that, I still go to Sunday school with don't care. The Bugatti was actually the first car where some of them asked, how does this work? Because they've all seen the broken Lamborghinis over the years, and he didn't pay much for that, and they know that. But the Bugatti, it's really hard to get away from the fact that even though probably the black LP640 is worth more money, but they're like, it's $1 million car. Well, there's a lot of debt involved in this situation, and as long as they keep going in the right direction, and fortunately we have the mouthpiece to accomplish such things, it all works.
But so a lot of these people are probably still in the car sales world and are still around Atlanta in the car world.
Yeah.
But you're now Ed Bolian, the celeb.
Well, the cool thing was that even before the VinWiki Ed buys the worst examples of the coolest cars, that was already my reputation. I was already buying.
Absolutely, that's another thing you should know.
Terrible
before
cars.
There was Hoovy. There was, in my life anyway, there was Ed. Ed would buy, and you've told a lot of these stories on here, but Ed would buy these trashy, questionable title, stuff that nobody wanted to touch. I remember one time Ferrari of Atlanta briefly listed a 80,000 mile F430, and nobody wanted it, because it was, and I called you and I was like, this might be my only way to get an F430. What do you think? You were like, I'd buy that. I had no problem with that.
All day long.
And I remember they sold it real quick. Probably wholesaled it. But you absolutely did have that reputation. You were the guy then who would buy these sketchy, questionable cars.
Well, and it came from the rental car company because they were the right cars to have to continue to mile up.
But I will say, my friends that's the reputation you have to them too. So it's great. They're like, oh, I bet Ed will get into that. and your association with Freddie has only furthered that.
Holy cow. And I mean, but look at us now. You got a Countach, a Carrera GT, and a
It worked
GT,
out. But who could have ever predicted then? Do you believe that?
Absolutely not. And John Ficarra recently commented that I had reached peak Ed. And I think you've reached peak Doug. I think we...
Peak Ed is... Yeah.
Because, it doesn't get more ridiculous exotic cars than what I've got. And you mentioned in discussing kind of the 4GT, Carrera GT, Countach that you feel like it's the perfect, justification for higher education Doug poster, and I feel the same way. I usually have the itch about every 45 to 60 days, I gotta buy a car, and I don't feel that.
You are at heart a car biz guy. When I think of the car business, especially with all the characters that you've had come through here who are a lot of other car business guys, and there is something about car business guys that I kind of feel like I am one. I've worked at the automakers, I've worked at dealers, but you are You know all the financing, the floating, the title. Like you're the guy. You're like the guy, and that was kind of always the situation.
And honestly, I do like romanticize the car dealership
Totally
world.
same.
I love it, and I miss the day-to-day transactions with cars and stuff but the problem was I couldn't have a young family and do that. Plenty of people do, and my heart goes out to you because
it's hard.
But
the divorce rate in the car biz
is really, really hard.
I
saw that. Like, everybody's on wife 3 and, like, has negative equity in their cars somehow, which should be impossible.
And you know what? Those guys were the best damn salesmen. Those guys, they're on their 3rd wife. They're paying alimony to 2 different people, child support people they never married. Those guys were hitting their numbers every month.
Because that was the thing. I was always trying to buy my own cars alongside taking in trades and stuff like that. Like, I was always the filter of like, I might just buy this from you before you trade.
Did you ever consider starting a dealership?
Very much so, yes.
After Lamborghini or during that whole period?
More so during that time. I actually learned in the rental car company that I very much should have gone to work for Hertz or Enterprise for a summer just to learn how the business works.
Yeah.
And so I kind of took the job at Lamborghini Atlanta thinking, well, let me just training wheels this idea of being a car dealer. And honestly, especially because of the economic times, I was making more than my boss and the owner most of the time. And that was a very frustrating reality for them. And I understand that, but your top sales guy is always going to be in that kind of boat. And I was like, well, why do I want to take all the risk and have my name guaranteeing the floor plan and everything else? And so I recognized the challenges there, and I realized I don't really want to do that. And right after I left, I knew at the time that the owner of the dealership was shopping it around and he wanted to sell. And I knew that I was the most expensive line item on the whole thing, and I was going to be the first to be invited.
I forgot about that, but that was basically the situation.
But I had several parties approach me saying, look, we'll buy it if you'll run it. And I'm like, look, guys, I left on purpose. Like, I don't want to do it. One of them offered me what was effectively like $5 million in equity in the store. And they would not have been approved by the manufacturers due to where the money came from. But I was like, yeah, because I knew them well or whatever. And you have to have like an on-site operator or whatever. And I've never mentioned that to anybody. But yeah, that deal blew up. And I was going to take it reluctantly, but I told them, I was like, look, whenever that equity vests and the earn-out's done, I'm not going to show up the next day.
Interesting.
Like, we know that. But,
interesting.
Hey.
Huh.
Sometimes I look at it now, as I would assume you do as well, and like, even though times are the most comfortable they've ever been, and they have been extremely, extremely uncomfortable, I still recognize, as you said, as you walked in my garage, like, man, this thing is going to bite you so hard one day. So these cars that we have, I know you had some big bills this year, and we will continue to, and I'm not really, even though I make more money, I now have the chances to have to spend so much more
because
money.
You are still a degenerate car enthusiast. And at the end of the day, like, we're lucky enough that we're able to do this as a career, like Hoovy.
Yes.
Deep degenerate car enthusiast.
Absolutely.
Can't stop.
King of us.
If the camera's turned off, he would still do it and just lose everything.
Yep.
Like, can't stop. And because of that, it's amazing that we're able to have this as a job, because this is what we were doing before there was ever a YouTube. And this is like who we were. I remember, I will never forget, one year I was terrified. In Georgia, there's a limit. You can buy and sell 5 cars per year before you get looked at. You should become a dealer. And you could probably sell 20. I mean, I don't know if they're coming after you. But one year I sold like 10. And I was like, this is going to be a problem.
Play with fire.
But that's just the people that we were.
It is. And
before there was a way to tell people about it and like make money doing it.
Well, and you mentioned in the Cannonball article that my first real business was breeding iguanas in my parents' basement, which is a thing. And so I realized, though, after I couldn't play basketball anymore because of my bad knees, like, the love of cars is one of those hobbies that you can do forever.
Yep.
And I think the fact that we have found a way to sustain it and to go pro at our hobby, it does have its liabilities. It changes the way that you look at some of this stuff, but it's also just been the blessing of a lifetime.
Do you ever worry that you might have to go back? You got a Veyron. Like, if this ended, you'd probably be all right, but you'd have to get like a Corvette, and then you wouldn't be like Ed, the guy with the, you know what I'm saying? That scares me.
Okay, and maybe, but I was talking to a guy that I used to sell cars to, and I had sold him, some great stuff like an Exige 260 and a Ventador and stuff like that. Today, business is great. He has everything. He has absolutely everything. And he was the first person I ever knew that had a Veyron. And at the time, he had like he had the one you drove, the black one that CNC had. He owned that. He painted it black. So it used to be black and red with a cream interior. Now it's all black with an Alcantara interior. And I tried to buy it this round as well. But he told me, he said, the most fun I ever had was when that was the only car I had. And I could drive it all the time, and everybody knew what I was going to show up in the car show. And so, like, I think that I could just have my 56,000 mile LP640 manual car or the Veyron, just one, and love it. And now I could afford to keep the Mercy on like a reasonable salary, but the rest of it would be a problem. But I think we should talk about that, because you mentioned that you didn't buy a Veyron because
I was worried about ownership costs.
Yes, but I think, and I may be proven wrong, and there are plenty of ways this could happen, but I think that if we look back in a year at what your Carrera GTs cost, what my Veyrons cost, and I bet we could toss James the Stradman in with his Koenigsegg, I think the Veyron's going to be the cheapest one.
Okay, couple things that you have to figure out. Does that include? I did a bunch of vanity stuff to my Carrera GT. I like put the electric wing in so I could leave the wing up at Cars and Coffee. I added heated seats,
but that's
I added a lift. That's all BS.
Agreed. Okay, we can exclude that kind of stuff. But
then the Carrera GT is going to be the cheapest, definitely.
Well, so how much have you spent so far?
Nothing. And Porsche just gave me a $3,500 service credit, part of the recall. The recall, there's been a stop sale or stop drive on the cars.
Yeah.
The recall is a new fresh set of tires. Boom, free. So I got that. You're going to get a free set of tires.
No, I am not. What?
Fresh set of tires, because Porsches were still worried about liability. Yeah. And so they want to get all the cars on new tires. And they're giving everybody a $3,500 service credit because the cars have been sitting because of the stop drive order. I have not been driving my car.
No.
Absolutely not.
Wouldn't dream of it.
Wouldn't dream of it. $3,500 service credits. That's my next service.
Did your insurance drop?
No, that only happened in Europe. In the US, I did a video on this. In the US, do you know how many cars are currently under a stop drive order? 3.5 million. The Kia Telluride.
Oh,
you drive around.
I did see that video. Yes.
It's like okay.
Yeah.
Every car with Takata is currently under a stop drive, and so it's like insurance could never drop all those cars, so they didn't drop mine. But Carrera GT will be the cheapest. Okay, Stradman and Koenigsegg terrifies me. I love Stradman dearly. He's one of my very favorite people. I watch him all the time.
Yes.
It's like my guilty pleasure. But
$35,000 lease payment.
It's unreal.
Yes.
And from other people I know with Koenigsegg's, I love Koenigsegg. I love the cars. I don't want to speak badly. I don't want Christian to come kill me. They have troubles. Building everything in-house.
Yes.
Doesn't necessarily lead to like assembly line. You made 300 of these and they all work the same way kind of quality.
It's rare to have a Pagani or Koenigsegg repair invoice, especially if it goes back to the factory, that only has 5 numbers before the period.
Yeah.
It is crazy. And I've seen James talk about the car, that it's not something that he just takes somewhere, because he knows that if something goes wrong, it's got to go back.
But think about that. Like, that is why I wouldn't pursue it. Like I want to be able to use my stuff whenever I want at any given moment.
Agreed.
And one of the things I love about both the Carrera GT and the Ford GT, they are supercars made by companies that make regular cars. And so they are tested like regular cars, they are built like regular cars, and they are reliable like regular cars. And that's what scares me about this bespoke stuff. Old Ferraris, like 90s Ferraris that have 50,000 miles, leather is worn.
Oh, yeah.
Stuff doesn't work anymore. They're not intended to be used at this level. And so, like, that's not, I want to use I love getting in any of my cars at any time and just go.
Well, I just don't care that stuff's torn up or whatever. I mean, like,
well, there's that too.
You got my wrinkly dash Veyron with the stretched seats and all the,
that Veyron is beautiful.
Oh, thank you. I appreciate that. The Glossit team is making it much more beautiful today. So
I can't believe after all these years, you got a Veyron and I got a Carrera GT.
I cannot either. I truly, like, that was a goal that I set, not expecting to get there. And I don't do that very often. I just needed some beacon out there to work for. And I can't believe we made it. But I remember the conversation that we had where you said, I asked you if you'd ever sell the YouTube channel. Yeah. And you said, I would for an F40, a Carrera GT, and a house in Nantucket. And that was, and,
got close enough.
You got close enough.
I'd rather have a Carrera GT house in Nantucket and some financial runway. It's actually better.
And
as a 25-year-old, that's what I thought. As a 35-year-old, I've realized this is actually a better situation.
That's it.
It worked out. Oh. And now we can think back on those days when things were like kind of sketchy and we're all good.
Now, how did you do it without getting gray hair?
It's coming.
Yeah, you're 2 years younger than me.
I spent an enormous amount of time working and building this business, and it was an enormous amount of work. And I am glad that I do not have to work at that level anymore, because I couldn't.
Well, I am very proud of you.
Well done.
This month, the VinWiki Car Stories is brought to you by Extreme Experience. They give you the chance to get behind the wheel of the greatest supercars on earth at the most amazing racetracks in America. I know you'll love it. I just got the chance to drive their brand new Ferrari 296. I hadn't had the chance to drive the car. They had it in town. It was the perfect way for me to experience a great new car. But whatever your dream car is, you can drive it with Extreme Experience. It's also the perfect holiday gift for the car lover in your life. So check them out now at the link in the description below. Ferrari, Lamborghini, McLaren, Porsche, all of it. So check them out now at the link in the description below to book your next drive with Extreme Experience.